Hi, welcome to Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness with your hosts, Chris Noble and Bill Prosman. In today's episode, we're going to talk about intentionality behind music, why it's so important to set intentions behind listening and performing your music, as well as experiences that both myself and Bill have had when music has uplifted us to a degree we've never experienced before. We'll also discuss our process with writing therapeutic and healing music, what Bill and myself experience when we go through the writing process. We'll be talking about that and much, much more, as always, in our open conversation here on Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness.
So I get these daily Google alerts. Google sends me anything that has to Protzman, Music Care, whatever, all that. I forget what the terms are I'm looking for. And so this one came a few days ago. And when it says Music Care, it's usually that company in France, but there's a Music Care app.
Oh.
And if you go and look for it, it's only for, professional use under the guidance of blah, 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 and whatever. And I guess the music is all curated. I don't know what music it is because I'm not a professional. I can't get the app. I suppose I could, but
what does that mean?
Yeah, it's like, so, okay, so I respect this is a clinical tool. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the study that came through apparently used that app because they reference in the part of the study you can see, they reference the Music Care app. And that's fine. Okay. So I'm making a big assumption here. But the interesting thing about the study to me, Chris, was that they had 37 subjects, I guess. And some of them were listening to music from the Music Care app and some of them were not. And they were doing, I got to look at it to get this term right because I'll botch it if I don't. Where to go? They were doing a medical procedure called central venous catheter or dialysis catheter. So either one of those were the procedure, the subject procedure.
Okay.
So some of them got music and some didn't. And the thing that's remarkable to me about the study is it goes to what we were talking about last week with regard to intention, because they found no statistical difference between the ones who had music and the ones who didn't. They all experienced the same level of pain and anxiety. For many reasons, right?
Right.
Obviously, why are you putting these headphones on me, Doc? Oh, it's just, I don't know what they said. Did he even tell them?
Right.
This is just how we do it, right? You wear headphones.
Yeah.
Is it Walter Cronkite talking to you? Is it?
What's the purpose of it?
What's the purpose, right? So it seems kind of weird in that they would almost prevent the patients from knowing what was happening. Did they put headphones with no music on another group? This is why you want to read studies carefully, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like what was actually happening during the study?
What's really going on? They just wanted to sort of try this and see if it worked, which is great. Let's do that. What's music going to hurt you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but I thought to myself, okay, if this had been my study, I wouldn't want to have biased it by saying, no, I'm going to play some relaxing music in your headphones while you have this procedure.
Right.
Because that would be a bias.
Yes.
Right? I'd be introducing the result that I hope to achieve directly with the subject versus allowing the subject to have their own experience. Is it completely, is it possible anymore to not know why you're listening to music?
And I guess the question is too, is for this. So I'll read out the conclusion here. It says, in the first randomized pilot study of musical intervention for central venous catheterization in awake patients in the intensive care unit, the musical intervention did not reduce patients' anxiety as compared with usual care. Well, I would also ask, first and foremost, what kind of music are they listening to? What if it's crap? First, right? What if it is? If it's not good music? And that is obviously a bias, but I think most people know the difference between Beethoven and something that, a non-musician unskillfully throws together, right?
Right.
Now, I'm sure it's not terrible, but I would be curious to hear this music as well. What is, because I would argue on the opposite side, I've played music, either my own composed stuff or not. And let's say it's got some wind and maybe a creek, nice light water in the background moving.
Sure.
And the immediate reaction for most people with these things is it's very soothing. Like I've got a crystal healing bowl, like a wow sound going on, and you just got this like, nice calm nature. It's how do you not feel more calm and relaxed when you listen to things like that? So that's where I go. Then those are examples of the opposite of this study, which is I don't think anyone needs to be told what they're listening to experience very relaxing effects.
Right. And would you not, if you were offering this calming music to a patient, I mean, would you not somewhere in the background be setting the dial to calm? And even if you didn't say anything, I mean, you're not playing screamo.
No.
No. We can eliminate some of the genres, but I'm first of all thinking to myself, so what went wrong, right? Anybody's first reaction,
right?
Music is supposed to be calming. I mean, some music is supposed to be calming if that was your objective. And the Music Care app is designed. You can read what it says about how it's supposed to be calming, and sit down in a quiet place with headphones and blah blah.
I'm sure it is, yeah.
And it must be. However, in these patients, and honestly, from where we were last week, I think it's a mistake to not introduce something with a purpose, especially when it's an intervention like music that is so wide-reaching. I mean, it's not like you're just targeting one cell in the body with music, right? You get the whole physiology, you get the emotions, you get the spiritual connection. All of that goes into it, and to try to not introduce that, it seems like you'd be getting in your way. I mean, I could change that study and the results of it. You could too, by just going in and say, hey, we want you to listen to this calming music while you're getting catheterized.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we could probably make that result happen just and play any music.
And then, that's where we get the placebo effect, of course, which is, the placebo effect is that funny thing in medicine that a lot of people like to ignore because it brings up a very obvious and kind of a paradoxical argument towards the pharmaceutical industry and whatnot, because it shows the power of the human mind and human intention, and mind over matter truly is a real thing. Anyone who's looked into Dr. Joe Dispenza or Bruce Lipton's work knows this. Like, this is not woo-woo. This is science that says that's 1,000% true. That's what the placebo effect is telling us, is that we have the power to shift ourselves physiologically just based off of what we believe and what we think. So there's that playing an element, of course. But, I look at the Johns Hopkins psilocybin therapies that they're experimenting with right now. And a big part of those therapies is the intention before you take the psilocybin. And I really don't think it's any different than even with music or CBD, THC, like cannabis or whatever it is. That intention is very, very important. And then the music has to deliver, of course. But I'm going to assume that the Music Care app is going to at least be like pretty decent. It's designed by music therapists, right? So it's got to be soothing.
It's got to be
to some degree. Yeah. I'm sure it's not terrible. So I'm sure it works. It's just now of a question of like, okay, so if it didn't do anything, I would love to know, like, what's the difference between the intentionality then behind that, And I have a hard time believing that it didn't do anything.
I know, isn't that strange?
I really do.
Well, in the first place, it's odd to me that anyone would design an app with what is believed to be calming music, because music therapy is the one responsible for finding out that the music that you love is your most powerful music. So if you happen to love a particular genre of music, let's say, I don't know, oldies crooners, and you're part of the study, and the music that's coming at you is new age, and you don't like that, that's a problem for me, right? Because we had the research that said the music you love is the most powerful music. And then we went around and we played some other music that, didn't line up with the person's interior experience of what music does. And we're studying two different things, right? We've tripped over our own research that said play music that the person loves, and then we're also trying to measure some third effect with this random music that we thought was the right music to play that actually isn't. So what's the question, right? Did we pick the wrong music? Which I think is a valid thing to ask.
Yeah.
Music Care. If I could ask you in French, I would. Pourquoi? Right. So why did you presume that you knew what music was best?
Mm.
I mean, that's scientifically, sort of, we have to ask that because it's part of the rigor of the thing. And then two, did you give any intention? Was there any intended outcome here that you were able to offer to these patients? And clearly, I mean, if your intention was to lower their pain and anxiety, wouldn't you say that? Right? And maybe use two different kinds of music. I mean, use music that is in your app and use music that is the music the patient told you that they like most.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That seems like a more reliable way of measuring the effect of music for the catheterization and anxiety and stuff around that. And now, of course, having said that, we all know that forest sounds and water and all of that's very calming for most people, right? How you would find 37 people that aren't calmed by music that you've researched as being, generally calming music.
Yeah.
It's a fair question too.
Like, you don't have to like the soothing music, but it's coming in. We've talked about this before. It's more functional.
Yeah.
And you're trying to serve a larger purpose with it. In a sense, I find I'm almost half the time writing it. I'll do something. I'm like, oh, that's too melodic, or it's too catchy in a sense. It's almost like too, not good, but it's becoming more music, something that becomes even more, let's say, artistic, more melodic expression. So we're moving away from the functionality of this piece and we're going into music, which is what we're more used to, which is just a form of entertainment. Oh, I really like that song. It's super catchy. People say that, and you actually don't really want to write that way with this kind of therapeutic music. You kind of want to keep it so that it serves its function. People don't get caught up in the music per se, because so many great songs take you on a journey and you're with that song on that journey. Whereas I find this kind of music, it's like, well, you want to encourage yourself to go on your own journey, certainly, but it's not going to be necessarily guided specifically by the music, when there's lyrics or there's real obvious verse, chorus, bridge structures, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's also like the way in which this music's written, I find I try to write it so that it's general, so that it's going to actually be a little more, I don't want to use the words like bland, because it's not, but like,
no, it's more inviting.
Generic.
It's more, it's more
broader spectrum.
Yeah. I almost said bigger tent. I was looking for something that wasn't a political analogy, but
yeah,
it appeals to more people well, I don't know. I mean, if you say healing music these days, people think of Tibetan bowls, right?
Yeah.
And ambient sound and not too much melody and very few lyrics, unless you're listening to Ram Dass, amazing guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with all. That's sort of our general Western appreciation for healing music. I don't know what they think about in the East, and clearly I don't know what they think about in France.
Yeah.
Which, who knows? Maybe they were playing, Edith Piaf or something, and or some other cultural icon that took people down the road. I mean, I don't think so, because, if it's in an app and it's designed by clinicians, it's probably more like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
In the healing mode.
Very ambient, probably.
Ambient, whatever. Yeah. If there's any vocal, it would be long tones.
Yes.
Interesting harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Even Tuvan throat singing. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff. But yeah, the lyrics kind of distract you from that.
Lyrics are very distracting.
I'm part of this sort of online group that talks about mushroom trips, and which I hope to have one day. And one of the guys last week said, "Hey, I'm going on this journey." He said, "I'll see you in 4 hours," right? And it turns out that he had curated a 4-hour playlist of the kind of music you're talking about, Chris. No lyrics, just soothing. But he did it in sort of like an intentional way.
Smart. For
his trip. And he shared all this, and he came back, and then he shared the playlist, which is really interesting too. And I've yet to find 4 hours where I can sit down and experience all of it.
Yeah.
But the idea was the intention. He wanted music around him. And he was very specific about the music that he chose and the order in which it was to be played and all of that. And of course, he said, that his trip just synced so perfectly with the music. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, well, of course it did, because that's what you intended, right?
Mm-hmm.
You intended for this music. And so, of course, your trip would sync with the music because you brought your intention to it. And why not? That's a great thing.
Oh, it's amazing. And it reminds me of my mushroom trips where music played such an integral role.
Yeah.
And it was the shaman in a lot of ways guiding me through the trip. It speaks that language when you're on something like mushrooms or psilocybin and you're tapping into these other frequencies and dimensions per se, where you really start to look at reality quite literally very viscerally different, because you can see it with your your physical eyes, or maybe it's a bit broader than that. It's your third eye, that pineal gland, that center that sees these. It's like your radio bandwidth is opening up when you're on mushrooms. And so the music, I find, can really synthesize with the mushrooms, especially with the intention behind them, and it will absolutely it will take you on a journey. And it starts to, sometimes I would see the music form, like coming into shapes in the walls, and it was like blending in with my physical environment, because you could really start to see the frequencies of this music and how they ebb and flow. And I found it's not surprising that he had a playlist, and I've gotten that way now over the years of doing mushrooms, where I'm like, well, I might not even end up listening to music, because sometimes I want to hear nature, for example. I want to hear the music of like the birds and the leaves and all that. But typically I'll have like locked and loaded playlists for mushrooms, because it's too good. It's too helpful and fun.
Why disconnect that part of like who we are, right?
It's so much. It's so much. And not just as musicians too. I think as musicians, we get it even more. Yeah. But for everyone, I know what they always comment, music has a very specific role when they're on mushrooms, for sure. They feel it and experience it differently.
That is so cool, because I'm down with that. I don't know what music I'll choose, but I will have different music probably for different experiences.
You start to understand genres, like anything that has psychedelic in it. Yeah. You start to say, so if it's psychedelic reggae, psychedelic rock, psychedelic, doesn't matter put the genre beside psychedelic, you really start to understand what that word means. Because when you're on, I think it's led a lot to my compositions, having done mushrooms earlier in my early 20s, where it made me fall in love with psychedelic music, because it's a way to create music specifically that seems to resonate when you're in states of consciousness like you are on mushrooms. I guess that's the best way to kind of explain it.
Yeah.
And
I get that.
Yeah. So it's like, I can't really articulate it, but it's a very interesting thing. I'm excited for when you get to experience that, because I know it'll happen when it's meant to happen. But music really does look, feel, and sound quite different. So it opens up your mind a lot. And I think for a lot of people, it also opens up a lot of healing for that very reason.
Yeah, I've had that experience of music being healing really profoundly so many times, that to welcome that in on a mushroom journey is just, it's so cool. I don't know. I'll have to see how it goes, right?
Yeah, let me know. Well, that'll be another future fun episode. Will be the debrief.
Exactly. I've got enough music practices so that I can catch myself in a bunch of different falling situations, or amp myself up in a bunch of different opportunity situations. So I feel like I'm ready to catch whatever comes post trip. I feel like I'm equipped for that in a more useful way, for example, than if I weren't. And that may just be the result of too much therapy.
I don't think there's a such thing, first and foremost. Pretty sure that's...
You know what I mean? It's like,
I do.
You build practices to be able to deal with your crap when it comes up. And I have no judgment about that. Just like, okay, so fine, we're dealing with suicide again, whatever it is,
Sure.
Bring it on. So I feel like I'm ready for the post journey. And this study again made me think about it. So how much intention do I want to bring to that, or should I let the mushroom be the intention?
Yeah, I think you want to bring your own intention, and you work together in collaboration with the mushrooms, and there's aspects where you learn to surrender, where you're like, I've fought the waves and the ebbs and flows of the mushroom trip previously, because it felt unfamiliar. It's not even, I won't even say scary. It's scary, but it's just because we fear the unknown. That's all that we're
just
fearing.
It's just familiar.
Everything about mushrooms is a new experience. It's a completely different way of literally living in reality. So it is jarring for people. Now, when you're microdosing, it's a great way to ease yourself in, because you're not,
extremely overwhelmed, which I was the first time I did mushrooms, because I did way too much for your first time.
Like the guy in Fabulous Fungi.
Now, I didn't do his godlike dose, which was I can only imagine like probably like 20 or 30 grams, which is like,
yeah, it's nuts.
Unfathomable how that would even turn out. But anyway, yeah. I still did a whole bunch, and it was great, but it was also like, I mean, I had no idea what the hell was going on, and my life was forever changed. But it would be nice to have intention. It'd be nice to have a bit more guidance and stuff like that. But actually, you know, you mentioned something, Bill, and I wanted to get wanted to ask you, which is, what are your sort of favorite techniques and tricks now that you do have, that you say that, you know, you'd implement after this trip? But like, what are those tools that you have been able to kind of acquire for dealing with your shadow, dealing with, you know, emotional ups and downs? Like, are they all musical tricks, or do they go outside of music?
Well, music is a modality. We're familiar with it, but there's lots of other things you can use too. And I love how all of the mind-based modalities are sort of coalescing as we wander through this pandemic. I mean, emotional intelligence used to be a thing, right? And what's happening is it's shifting out of the head and more into the heart as we get toward 5D consciousness, right? So we're becoming more aware that it's not just, you know, as a man thinketh, so he is, or whatever. And it's not mind over matter. It's the combination of everything. You know, command and control is great, but there's other things you can do, right? So I was doing what I do years ago, with a room full of people and a grand piano and kazoos and the whole 9 yards. And one of the keynote speaker actually came up to me afterwards. He said, "Bill, I love what you do, but asked me, but could you do this? If I dropped you on the mountaintop in the middle of Afghanistan somewhere with a platoon of soldiers, could you do what you do?" And I thought about it for a while. And I said, you know what, I could probably, you know, take a little portable speaker, and, you know, kazoos aren't heavy. But it got me thinking, right? How effective would this music care thing be if you couldn't play any music? And long answer to your question, which is that if music is in there, like inside you someplace, then it's available to you. And the science is that if you remember hearing a song, you get the same effects as if you heard the song, experience the song in real life. Now, that's not the same as if you were at a live concert. I mean, let's be honest.
Of course.
Live concert, totally different experience. But the idea of playing something in your ears and remembering it, same physiological effect. The brain's smart, but it isn't smart enough. No, you know, whether it's hearing something. So you get all of that wonderful stuff. So my practices generally evolve around putting music in so that it's in there permanently, like dialing in the neuroscience. The neuroplasticity is built around the music, whether it's something I can play or not. You know, the music is in there. So I've got music that is in there for specific purposes, and being able to go to that music for that purpose is a great intention. According to science, most powerful thing you can do, right? Play your music along with your intention. You got powerful music. So depending on the situation, there's music for that. And I've built a little internal catalog of the stuff that I hit most often, that's most triggering. And those are like my, you know, I've got top songs for that. And then there's also the stuff that I enjoy, and built music around that too, right? So there's a song for every purpose.
I love that. Of course, right?
Right. And I dialed back on the playlist thing, Chris, you know, because I used to have this soundtrack your life kind of deal. And I still think that's a really good thing to do. But I want to see a very structured playlist, one with a beginning and a middle and end, right? And if I'm going to do like a treatment for something, treatment for joy, I want to start slow, and then I want to build that emotion, and then I want to peak, and then I want to let it down, right? It's just, I want to do that happily ever after thing around. So what I call silver bullet playlist, but finding 4 songs that let that happen.
Okay.
They start out slow and introduce you, you know, like you can feel the mushrooms are coming on right now, or whatever it is, whatever the plant medicine you're using is starting to have an effect. And then it eventually crests. And so 3 songs up and 1 to let go, you know, and that has been really useful for me too, because among other things, it makes me sit still. And whether I've got the headphones to listen or whether I have to sit still and remember those 4 songs, there's a practice involved in that. It's really healthy and affirming. By the time you're done with joy, or by the time I'm done with joy, you know, I'm flipping joyous. And by the time I'm done with sadness, I'm done being sad for a while. You know, it lets the emotion become present, and become fully embodied, hopefully, if I'm doing it right and I'm not distracted by something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then it lets it go. And when it comes to the crazy stuff, I don't want to be full of anger all the time. So that kind of tool lets it flow, which I think is healthy. Having grown up depressed, I realized much later in life that was a result of stuffing anger. So I don't stuff anger anymore. So long answer, short question. And my anger song is going to be different than yours, anybody else. So that's fine too, because there's science for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people you probably read about that study that was in Australia not long ago, where they studied people who just love metal music. They go insane for it. And it was talking about how joyous they feel after listening to metal. And I get that. I can really see how that's possible, right?
Mm-hmm. It
doesn't work for me. I mean, I get the adrenaline and all that, but I don't get that kind of extreme joy that I would get from some other piece of music from, whatever that is. But I'm like, that's really cool, man. Go for it. If that's your joy music, then more power to you. And I don't know a whole lot of metal band players, but the ones that I do know are flipping PhDs, man. They build their own instruments.
They are so smart.
Recording techniques and whatever. I mean, these guys are like the full embodiment of a music nerd.
They are.
Masquerading as a metal band.
Yep. Well, they're like jazz and classical. They're very similar to those genres, right? Where it's just like the musicianship is so high caliber.
It's over the top.
I mean, they're so amazing at their instruments.
Juilliard PhD playing the upright bass on stage in a blood-stained wedding dress.
And that's what I love about the metal genre, though, is when it gets into the theatrics and, I find that so fun. I love that.
So, I mean, that's joyous right there, just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Stolen Babies, people. You can hear them right now on Spotify or wherever else. Stolen Babies. Great.
Stolen Babies.
Stolen Babies.
Another part of the metal genre I love is the song titles and the band names. They have to be absurd. They're great. I love it.
That's how it works.
Yeah. I love it.
I'm probably enough of a rebel to do that, but I don't know if that's my genre or not. I think I'd probably pick something else that's as I have done. I've screwed around with classical music a lot in front of people publicly.
Yeah, it's great. I think that's the most fun, is to hybrid it and, mix it up. But that's really interesting. I haven't really approached music in that way of, I haven't done it consciously. I'll put it that way. Cause I actually, when you were describing this, I was like, I remember when I was 16, I was very fortunate. My aunt was going on this, basically like an expedition to Tanzania, Africa, with her friend to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Wow. I was in grade 10 at the time. And her friend at the very last minute had something come up. She couldn't make it. She couldn't go on the trip, wasn't really going to get much of a refund. So she said to my aunt, hey, anyone else that, want to go on the trip? I jokingly had no expectations. I was like, I'd go. And then a couple of days later,
you did.
I did. So
yes,
I got exempted from all my exams. It was amazing. And I couldn't have been happier. And I went to Africa for 3 weeks to Tanzania. And I climbed Kilimanjaro with my aunt and did all that. And Kilimanjaro was a 9-day expedition, 7 days up, 2 days down. And it was my first real time dealing with major altitude and altitude sickness.
How tall is Kilimanjaro? Is it?
So it's just above the base camp of Everest. And, I honestly can't remember the stats. So I'll pull them up here on Wikipedia.
It's over 10, I'm guessing.
It is definitely over 10. It's 19,341 feet. So that's 5,895 meters. Yeah. So that was my first major climb like that, major dealing with the altitude. It kicked my ass, to say the very least. Altitude and me don't go too well together. I was very sick by day 2, and I still had 6 more to go. And it's one of the most physically exhausting, difficult things I've ever had to do, when you're like, I'm already at 0% and I have to somehow find an exceptional amount more of energy to keep going here. And there got to be, one of the techniques was picking a song that I really liked at the time, that gave me hope, that gave me motivation, energy. It was one of the main ones that I would loop quite a few. I think I was singing some Sinatra, some Frank Sinatra at times, just songs from my childhood that made me feel good. There was one song in particular from Coldplay called Swallowed in the Sea. It was off their third studio album. And it's a beautiful love song. And the melody just felt really good to sing a cappella. So I was starting to I was actually through pure necessity singing out loud because I found it the easiest way to distract myself, to feel better, to not be so mentally and physically exhausted in that particular time. Also, for some reason, alleviated some of my nausea because I was just constantly nauseous. I couldn't eat. I basically didn't eat for about 6 days on that trip. And so, I mean, yeah, it was like that very visceral, physical, like kicked my butt. But one of the things that kept me going was music, and it was singing it internally, like you mentioned, to myself. And then eventually it became so much more like, I need to actually like vibrate. Like I need to sing it. It needs to come from inside me. And then I hear it as well. And it creates that full sort of circuit. And man, I'll never forget it. It kept me going. And I remember the day that we summited, we came down, and the only way you can get out of altitude sickness is to go down. Like it's just, there's no other way to do it. You just got to get off that mountain and go back down to sea level. So as I was summiting as I was coming down the mountain, every step I took felt like a new breath of life was just injected into me. And it was a really fun sensation to be like, oh, life is coming back into me. So then I started singing from like, instead of this necessity to keep myself alive, it became an expression of the most serene joy because I was feeling unbelievable levels of euphoria as I came down the mountain and came back into like a proper body that was healthy again. And I felt not only so good just to come down from that, but the effects, and athletes will do this too, where they put their bodies in those machines that replicate high altitude,
right?
So that their blood cells will, I forget the scientific situation that happens with altitude, but basically it's like your red blood cell count changes and stuff like that. And so they do that because when you go at a higher altitude, you learn to function with less oxygen. Your body gets stronger. So then when it gets more oxygen, it's just even that much more stronger. So it's a really good method for training. So anyway, at the end of this hike, I had the same effects happening where I felt like a freaking superhero for the next couple of days after that. And again, I felt like expressing this in loud song because I felt so jubilant and like joyous. And I was just like, la, 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 la. You know, I couldn't keep it in. So music kept me going. And then music also became my sort of celebration of being alive basically afterwards. So you triggered all those memories when you're saying
oh man,
your methods there. Cause I was like, maybe I was doing a Bill method.
I'd love to take credit, but they aren't mine. It's just people have been doing this, right?
Right.
For 1,000 years. And I think it's high time we brought it all back and made it more conscious because, well, I mean, look around. We're not doing a great, society, not doing a great job with managing belief, I think is the right way to put it. Mm-hmm. Did you read that article? I don't know if you saw this or not. It was in Ars Technica last week. The hacker who basically designed the disinformation campaign that made Hillary look really bad in her election with Trump, wound up sort of pushing the vote toward Trump. And this was one guy hired by a company called Koala Media or something like that, who had the skills to set up thousands of virtual servers around that could not be connected to each other to promote fake news. And he's coming out because he feels, first of all, it's time to take that kind of skill and use it for good.
Yeah.
Ethical hacking, right?
Cool.
But also his own dad doesn't believe the truth anymore. And it's a result of something that this guy, his kid, did to promote all this fake news. And it shifted the electorate. So the fact is that we've been, as believers of whatever, this thing called music has kind of sort of not been near the top of the pinnacle of our belief system when it comes to healthcare, at least in the West, right? We think about it in a different way. But you coming down the mountain, singing literally for joy, and the way that I deal with stuff like suicide or whatever, these aren't secrets. They aren't, anything new or novel. People have been doing this for centuries, thousands of years, I would imagine. And let's bring them back because, first of all, they're free, and secondly, they're really powerful. They really
so
work.
Powerful. I mean, and it is, and it's free. It's the ease. It's like breath work. It's like meditation. It's like so many of these things that can completely change your life. It can change so many physiological and psychological issues that we encounter every day, and really severe ones. And like the impact's endless, as we know. It's infinite, really, what it can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the mission I feel like we're both on in a lot of ways, is just bringing back music and sound healing to the masses in a much more tangible way, because it's been done. It's so much a part of our history and our past, but it's been forgotten and it's been overlooked. And we're just now, through science, being reminded, with new tangible science, that this stuff works. It works powerfully well. But like with anything, it's like, how are you using it? What's the intention behind how are you using it? What kind of music, like we were talking about before. I mean, all that matters. So it's great, but it's a huge area. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of what
we know, like, so little about.
Oh my God.
But your experience in the pyramids, I mean, there's literally sound all around us.
Yes.
As they're starting to discover with mushrooms. Mushrooms have been around a long time too, right? So these modalities that are ancient, they just must be laughing at us somewhere in the world. It's like, look at America's finally discovering music.
They remember now,
Yeah.
They're remembering.
So why not? Let's do that, right? Or whatever it is. And for heaven's sake, the toughest part about this is, you don't have to be a trained singer to sing. Mm-hmm. You can have the amazing physiological effect of song without being Pavarotti, or Adele, or anybody else who has a trained voice. We were just listening to T-Pain on Wait, Don't Tell Me, National Public Radio, right? And apparently the story is he showed up for his NPR tiny desk thinking he was going to be an interview subject. He didn't know he was there to perform. And yet he gave a performance that has had more views than, like 24 million views.
Wow.
And he's not a trained singer. And that's what he had to do that day, because he had nothing else. And of course, obviously the guy's got chops, right? So, and why not? So what? Who cares? If autotune is the thing that makes you sound different, and and then go for it, man. Whatever, cool. But if you're just looking for some relief, just get your body vibrating.
That's what it is. Like, even if it's just humming and all these different things, like, just to use sound vibration, use your vocal cords for so many different things other than just talking.
Beatbox, even whatever gets some energy happening in there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If breath is hard for you, don't push it, but singing opens up, the system. It doesn't shut it down, and do that, right?
I was first taught how to breathe properly, not through yoga and not through meditation, but through my vocal lessons.
Yep.
That was where
playing the horn.
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. It's all diaphragm. It's stomach first, then chest, not only chest, which is what most people do.
And did you have this experience, like in middle school years, where you could run longer with more freedom than anybody else in the room?
I had pretty good stamina. Yeah. Thanks to all that.
And thanks to the breath work.
Yeah,
exactly. And people were like, I wasn't fast, but I could outlast anybody on the track. And it was weird because, I don't have any training in track and field.
Mm-hmm.
I just play the horn. And yet it's the breath work that makes it all possible.
Yeah. It's knowing how to use oxygen, it's just we could do many podcasts just on oxygen and breath work, because that's another thing that we're rediscovering that we've done for thousands and thousands of years, but now science is catching up. And it's saying, like, that you can oxygenate your entire body. And I've done this so many times now where I experiment with that, and I can hold my breath for many minutes now. And I'm asthmatic too, so I even have like a respiratory quote unquote issue, and it doesn't matter. Like, I still can have far greater lung capacity than an average person who isn't doing breathwork exercises. It's purely because it's like your body. It's like running a car. It's like having a car that drives manual, and you literally don't even know what the difference between first, second, third, fourth gear even does. So you're kind of like trying to jam it from 1 to 4, and your car's going, oh God, oh geez. And like, it'll get there, it'll work, but man, is it gonna do some damage and not get you anywhere. Like, it's not going to get you there faster. It's going to be poor performance for the vehicle, and ultimately it's going to wear it down way faster too. It's the same with our breathing. Like, all that high chest breathing tells your body physiologically that you're in fight or flight. You know, it doesn't know the difference between getting chased by a bear and you just breathing improperly. And if you don't think that's not a big deal, well, when your body is stressed, it releases, as you and me both know, all those hormones and many, many things that really deteriorate your body, because it's not designed to be stressing constantly. But if you're breathing like that constantly, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. You breathe yourself
to death? No,
to
kidding.
death. Yeah.
But,
I mean,
really.
theoretically, it could happen, right? If you didn't learn to breathe deep. I mean, seriously, breathe deep.
Mm-hmm.
It's a challenge. I mean, here we are talking about all this, but when I started swimming again a few years ago, before the pandemic and they closed all the pools, I discovered that I had to relearn how I use oxygen. And I love how you say that, how you use oxygen, because you don't get much time when you're breathing in the water for a breath.
No.
But you can certainly do it. And it's not a matter of, when you're swimming, it's not a matter of holding your breath, which is convenient in some circumstances. You do learn to be able to minimize the number of breaths that you need, but you really have to use that oxygen wisely. So it's a real delicate balance to figure out where your particular amount of in-breath needs to be. Out-breath is easy, at least underwater. You know, and to find how you fit into that equation for the amount of effort that you need to do, you know, so many laps in such a period of time. And that's a whole new thing once you're conscious of it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and you can always stand up in a pool, people. So don't try to kill yourself. I mean, Wim Hof is amazing. If you haven't seen him, go see him, or go see his videos, because it's amazing what the body can do, you know, with a little education. And he teaches other people to do that amazing stuff too. So, yeah, I mean, music is a relatively benign modality. It's not illegal yet.
No, we're not.
You can do it on your own.
I will be off planet if it ever becomes.
I know
illegal.
we'd be.
I mean, that's when, if they make that illegal, that's where I fully am like, okay, I'm going to Mars.
We all talk about moving to Canada down here the next election. You know, it's not moving to Canada, right? And,
I hear that every election in this.
Right. So you know, when the music police come for us,
yeah, right.
You know, let's go there. I was, I don't know, chagrined at the same time, and also a little bit. It kind of made me smile to hear that Trump had some guy around him that was there to play music.
That's sick. You know, I like that.
And then I heard the music that they were playing is playing like Andrew Lloyd Webber and stuff like that. It was okay, fine, okay, whatever. You know, I'm not going to be judgmental about this.
Yeah.
You know, if that worked, great. But do you remember when President and the First Lady went to visit the UK for the first time? They didn't have an audience with the Queen. Maybe they did. I don't know. But they were greeted by the Prime Minister at the time. Well, it wasn't Theresa May, was it? Was she the Prime Minister? She could have been.
She could have been.
And they were greeted at this palace, like this gorgeous palace somewhere in the middle. And there was a marching band, and they played Amazing Grace and whatever. The music was chosen so well. And it was all orchestrated and coordinated and choreographed to be a very impressive display of the core of our history, right? So I'm Scottish and UK too by heritage.
Okay.
Very moving. And I watched the whole thing. It took about 20 minutes, something like that, before everybody was welcomed and they went inside. And Trump was trying to figure out what camera was on him the whole time. He looked so uncomfortable. He was unmoved by the music that was making the Prime Minister of UK moving her to tears, and her husband. And you could tell like Melania was holding it back too. And yet our president was just like, he wasn't there. He wasn't present in this music. And you have to resist music like that. I mean, you really have to push back against it. It's hard to stand there in that kind of circle of power with Amazing Grace playing, on bagpipes and a full military band and not be moved. I get shivers down my spine thinking about that right now. How can you be that impervious? You really have to work hard to push it back. Like once you learn how to breathe right, you have to really work hard to not breathe right.
It's true.
It's like you can't unring that bell. And as humorous as the story about the guy following Trump around with music was, it didn't really sink in at that big moment that was televised for him.
Yeah.
And I often wonder when I'm looking at places where music is being played in public, whether it's our national anthem at a ball game, what's the intention there? What's happening?
Right.
Black Lives Matter sort of has changed that. The way that we hear the Stars Spangled Banner has changed that. The way that we hear God Save the Queen will change when Queen Elizabeth passes away, and we have to start saying God Save the King.
Right.
Think about the intention behind that. Right. And these are just subtle little things. The rest of the world doesn't, oh yeah, okay, God Save the King. Oh, I forgot. I gotta say the king now, right?
Yeah, right. Just a lyric change, but no, it's
it goes deep. And once you've learned that and the importance of that, every little thing changes around that in a way that's really profound and quite powerful, actually. I think
intention.
You can't hear Amazing Grace without knowing that the words are written by a slave trader, right? And
I actually didn't know that, Bill. I didn't know that.
Oh, but yeah, it's a crazy story. But yeah, and he was going to lose his ship full of slaves, and he was not a believer, right? But he hit his knees, and that's when he got the words. And seriously, if Trump isn't the symbol, here we go, politics, but if Trump isn't the symbol for the white supremacist weirdos that come out of the closet, and he was unable to respond to Amazing Grace with any kind of an authentic look, demeanor, it's like, no, we can be more skillful in the world, right? When it comes to music, we can sing when we go up and down the mountain.
100%. I just thought about, I was not brought up religious. So I remember the odd times I went into church. It was always a very interesting experience for me because I didn't have either side. So like the stigma of some people, especially like friends of especially my age who were born into religious families, have a lot more usually resentment towards that religion typically.
Yes.
And then on the other side, yeah, exactly. And then on the other side, they might have so much kind of blind faith in a sense towards that religion where they're not very inclusive of others. So it kind of goes on either spectrum. For me, I would always kind of fall like very neutral, very much Switzerland when I'm in the church, because I'm like, I don't know, like, I don't know what to expect. I'm just kind of here. So I remember in some of these church situations where I was like, I'll be honest, especially when I was a little younger, I'd be a little bored at whatever the situation was.
Yeah. It's not like a whole,
it's usually not. Nowadays I'd be much more interested in hearing like what are even the words being said, and I would probably be a bit more tuned in. But regardless, when the music would start, whether it was a choir or even like the church bands or even just one person singing a cappella, every time I always was like, oh my God, this is moving. I mean, especially in the acoustics of a church and the intention behind it, a very, very obvious intention being put behind the song. And it was always, always, always so moving. And, Amazing Grace being performed, I've heard in a church with just a cappella, a couple of people singing with gorgeous harmony. I mean, like goosebumps galore. If you're not brought to tears or, at the very least deeply moved emotionally, then yeah, you have to be kind of consciously shutting yourself off from that, because I didn't go in expecting anything. So I didn't have really the intention to listen, but I didn't have the intention not to listen either. So I was very much kind of I was open.
Yeah, you were open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, with that being said, it's just interesting to hear how, if the intention is that I'm in a bad mood today and I don't want to open up to anything and screw that and all this, then that is what you're going to receive. So if you take a therapeutic piece of music and try to go into it with like, I don't know, this isn't going to work. And this is, you've already kind of made up your mind. So that intention is powerful because you won't be able to receive all the healing benefits when you've made up your mind to not really receive them.
Yeah.
Tension's pretty important.
There's there's a level of individuality that I don't think people have really appreciated about this yet. We like to say, the vaccine, we're 80% vaccinated, right? That means 80% of the people aren't going to get COVID.
Right.
Well, that may be so, but then we found the ones where they, even though they're vaccinated, they still get it, right? So there's that.
Yes, lots.
Yeah. So there's that. We got to have this medicine work 98% of the time in order to approve it, right? And we can say happily with music that it doesn't work 98%, it doesn't even work 100% of the time. Mm-mm. But for one person to be able to have their specific song is 100% of the time, right? Mm-hmm. That song isn't going to work for Bill or Chris or whoever, but it worked for that guy, and that's cool, right? That's where we want.
And it works really well.
It works really, really well. We've got to allow that a little bit more. That kind of individuality is powerful. And rather than individualize as well, my way is the right way, and none of you, know
it's anything. Only Amazing Grace, and no other song will work.
Right. It's like, and in B flat, it can't be in B.
Yes, exactly. It's the same thing, and it's like with medicine, of course, you're dealing with chemicals and a lot of things that can go wrong with medicine, and with music. Once again, it's like it's really hard to OD on music. It's really hard to injure yourself with music.
Well, unless you're listening to 2 and 440 tuning, then you're wrong.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Then that's a whole other can of worms.
432 or nothing.
Yeah.
That's the problem, of course, with that French study. They weren't listening. It wasn't tuned the right way.
That's the main issue. Let's be real.
That's the main issue. Yeah. There's no other issue. Just that. I have no idea what's best for you, my friend, and you don't have any idea what's best for me. But you know what? It's really great that we can be in that place, because isn't the conversation, isn't the process more important than the thing? I mean, We're having this conversation. Somebody's listening to us going, no, they don't know what they're talking about. Amazing Grace isn't it's this. Yay, good, hooray. It's whatever that is for you. Go do that, right? Because you can. And if it works, then fantastic. If it doesn't, you'll find something else that works. Got that much music.
It's like taking all these tools, everyone meditates a little differently. Everyone does yoga a little differently. Everyone goes on a run a little bit differently, it doesn't matter. It's just like, I think it always comes back to us having a bit more faith in ourselves and in that, that inner knowing and that inner voice that we all have that guidance within ourselves, but it's so easy to seek it externally and to get pulled around and influenced by external forces. But music at the end of the day kind of helps you come back to yourself as well. Especially when you listen to some piece of music that for whatever reason, it makes you feel more whole, makes you feel more comforted, whatever that is, and you don't have to question that, really don't have to overanalyze it. You don't have to overthink these things. If it makes you feel better, then that's all that really matters.
That's the thing, right? That's recalibrating your internal, your true north or whatever you want to call it, whatever that thing is. And with practice, you can really get good at that. And it's not it's not the kind of practice that says, well, this is what I like and this is what I don't, right? Great, choices are fine. We don't like, but the practice is becoming aware of what happens to you when you listen to something you don't like. If you're not a fan of metal, put on some metal and see what happens to you. With that as a stimulus, you might surprise yourself.
Yeah.
My mom, bless her heart, she was chronically happy, right? To the point where it was like a little annoying. It's like she never got sad, and she's a musician. How can you be a musician without sadness? I mean, just as an example, right? There's so much music that takes us deeply into sadness that, I mean, joy is more, it's a better thing. I like joy, but I don't know what percentage of the music do you think in the world is sad music?
I'd say there's a lot. I mean,
a lot, right?
A lot of emotional music out there.
We need that.
We do. And because of all of our emotions aren't inherently good or bad. They just are. And we'll put the emphasis if it's a good or bad, but we have them for a reason. They're there to be another form of a GPS coordinate system. If something makes you angry, well, that's telling you something that you need to pay attention to. And if something makes you happy, it's the same thing. So experiment with that. And music, I mean, my God, is it ever a great way to just bring out emotion, whatever that emotion is,
It's the emotion's a good gateway, right, into the rest of it. Because you can, through emotion, you can sort of get in contact with your physiological response to anger in a new way, right? And you can take your pulse and all that and figure out how you're breathing and whether you're breathing fast or slow. And but the emotions are kind of an interesting way of getting into that. And we all remember what it's like to be angry or sad or happy or, scared. Scary movies are great with that. You really,
they are.
You really calibrate your fright when you're watching The Birds or something, or what's the Bates Motel?
Psycho.
Psycho. Yeah.
Yeah.
That shower scene, that music is
Classic.
indelible.
Yeah.
And
writing that music's fun because you start to really like, it's the literal opposite of me writing my meditation music is writing for a horror soundtrack, which I actually had to do over the weekend, which was really fun.
Oh, perfect.
So I was really trying to find some. I actually tuned everything to 440 because it was horror. So I actually didn't want the medicinal. I wanted something to feel a little more off because that was the intention behind the music, and to put some of the sounds and like you're really going for things that go like oh I'm scared, I'm chilled, and to be seeking that in the music is kind of trippy. It's really fun. It's a fun contrast to play with. So I think there's therapeutic elements to even the horror side of things too.
And just for the listeners who can't see Chris right now, he looks completely normal today. There's no, tragic effects from having spent the weekend scoring a horror film.
I don't have extra big bags under my eyes,
No, nothing. No horns. I mean, I know, October's coming here, you got Halloween and all that, but no, he looks pretty normal to me.
Thanks. Yeah. No, I think I'm came away unscathed.
There's sort of a poltergeist though floating in the back of.
Oh, well, that's just normal. Yeah,
okay.
That's the.
I won't worry about that.
My friendly neighborhood poltergeist. Actually, oddly, you say that word. The film we were doing was based off of Poltergeist. It was it's not full horror. It was a horror comedy actually. So there's
even better
elements and comedy too. So you get to contrast it.
That's lovely. That's contrast is where it's at. I think.
I think so too.
And maybe the whole game is just about managing contrast. First of all, like being aware of it, and then being able to, skillfully steer through it, or maybe bring people along with you through it. I don't know whatever the particular role you have, but obviously as the music guide for this film, your responsibility is to set it up.
Oh yeah.
Do you have to set up the laughs too?
Yeah, a little bit. So I would contrast it by playing some gypsy jazz.
Yeah, you go.
Django. To contrast the more kind of vibes. So you get, and especially in comedy, it's always more fun when you have like complete contrast, right? Stark.
The bigger the contrast, the bigger
funnier
the laugh,
the joke usually,
or the bigger the jump.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I love it. Well, again, with time, I'm just looking here and.
Top of the hour,
and I gotta run again after all this, but I guess you got to get some rest, Bill.
I got to get some rest. Yeah, we spent all weekend with somebody in the room upstairs tromping around at 4 a.m, moving furniture, and
that's fun.
Yeah, so that was a real exercise in forgiveness, deep breathing. Thank you for listening in on our conversation and for taking time to show your appreciation with a like, share, or subscribe. Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness is a practice of spontaneity, and we welcome your comments, ideas, and questions. There are ways to connect with us in the show notes, so let us hear from you. Until next time, this is Bill Protzman along with Chris Noble wishing you great musical health. Samara Huchaya.